All right. So it seems to be that we're talking about work stuff tonight. So the question about does your company own my repos dovetailed into a conversation about, well, do they own my thoughts? Do they own uh, what I'm thinking? And the answer is it depends. Uh, and the story I want to talk about here is IBM. So I work for IBM. I have nothing bad to say about IBM today. It was a great job. I loved it. Most of the job was fantastic. This was some time ago, so I can talk about it in the past tense. But I remember, I'm sort of pedantic when it comes to signing work agreements, and I think you need to be too. And as you guys know, I recently took on a full-time employment with a rather large company, and so I've been, a lot of these questions have been on my mind as well, and some people have been asking them. So I thought I'd make a Zettel casting video about it. They don't own your thoughts if you haven't signed a piece of paper that says they own your thoughts. That's the short answer. The short answer is they don't own your thoughts and your dreams and your random ideas unless they have had you sign a piece of paper that says we own any innovation and idea you have on or off the clock. And I want to tell you that a lot of people might not think that they have signed this agreement, but you probably should check. So, because particularly if you're a contributor to open source, if you're thinking about starting your own business on the side, which everybody wants to do, a lot of people don't use their primary employer as their source of fulfillment in life, even on a technical level. And so they want to do things outside of the boundaries of the company, and they want to own those thoughts and ideas. And a lot of those thoughts and ideas might happen on company time. Well, what's company time? That's a separate video, and but there, to catch all of these people from breaking away and doing, and we've had this conversation before, and we've had a couple of people in here who have legal backgrounds who are like, well, how can they even enforce that? Other people have not had legal backgrounds. I certainly am not a lawyer, but so everybody's got a different opinion, and everybody said that would never hold up in court. So the answer is, if you sign a piece of paper that says you did, then you do. So make sure that you know what you've signed, right? And you might have to do some digging to find out what that agreement is. Now, thankfully, during the course of all of my onboarding, I didn't encounter anywhere any indication that the work that I was doing belonged. The thoughts that I was having and thinking belonged to the company on or off the clock. And frankly, if they had, I would never have signed on, because I am so active in other activities outside of work, even though they're technology related, that I would never ever agree to that. And some people have. I think more companies are waking up to the fact that they can't try to own everybody, but there are many that do. I believe Nike was another one when I was there. That was another company that said that they owned everything you think on or off the clock. Speaking of which, kind of related to this, most universities, there are a couple of notable universities that don't do this. Stanford is one. MIT is another one. Most of the high-end technical universities give you IP ownership rights over your ideas that you have while you're at the university. But while I was at Brigham Young, I started a company, and I came to find out while I was there that I read through this because I was really interested to see what they were going to do. And I had some pretty innovative ideas that I wanted to, make my own and build into a company. And then I read the clause at Brigham Young University that said that they owned every single idea, every intellectual thought, while you're enrolled in their university. So, and that meant everything. And it didn't stop WordPerfect or Novell and all these other places from breaking away. If I remember the story right, I don't probably, from there, but so you need to be sure that so that's not just a company, it's also a university. So one of the greatest things about Stanford, it's probably the university that I would go to if I were to go back and pay that kind of money to go to a university. Stanford, Sun Microsystems got its start. Not only did the university help them get their start, Uh, SUN stands for Stanford University Network. So Stanford let this organization form and promoted it and gave them space within their institution to start their own company. And so they took an exact opposite approach. They said, look, we want to spin off, successful entrepreneurs and businesses, so much so that they let them keep the name Sun. So they became their own company. They owned all the IP to Sun Microsystems. There was probably some exchange between them and the university. I'm not aware of any, but it wasn't mandatory. It was like they encouraged them to have their own ideas and to go out and market and profit from those ideas. And so the companies with the hoarder mentality who say, no, we own every single thought you have, those companies are thankfully, I believe, in decline. And it's more about this open core business model. That's a term GitLab coined, where everything is transparent. And if you have an idea, you're able and sometimes responsible to share it with the rest of the world. I believe GitHub is another organization that does that. From what I know of them earlier on when I was following their education offerings and stuff. So let me just say this: just be careful that you know what you've signed when you started the company, and you can go look at them. You don't need to fret about it too much, but I mean, if you've got a big idea, and I know somebody out there is going to have one. I mean, there's been many big ideas. If you have a big idea that could revolutionize everything, and you want to keep it free and open, then you need to make sure that you haven't told your company you can't start a free and open source project of any kind. Creative Commons, you can't even write a book or a curriculum. And that's another reason that I was very picky about who I worked for. That's another little story, and I'll end with this one. So I considered, you guys know that I started SkillStack 8 years ago, and in 2013, and ups and downs and many fun things, different forms of teaching, and helping people learn. And during that time, at one point, I was approached by a rather large company. There's two company owns my thoughts stories here. So one of them was this company, fantastic company, doing great things in the world, training people. It was a boot camp company that you would know. And they came to me and they said, we would really, I got actually approached by them 2 or 3 times. In fact, the CEO once told me, we're going to get you one of these days. She's absolutely phenomenal. I really love her. And they wanted me to write curriculum for them. And I had a conversation with their lead of, their educational lead, the person who's in charge of the company over all the materials for this for-profit bootcamp company, and we had a very cordial conversation. And at one point, I asked a simple question. I said, "Well, if I prepare course material for you, who owns it? Do I maintain ownership rights to it? Can I still use it for SkillStack? Can I?" And they said, "Oh no, that would become our property." And I was like, "Bye-bye." And I was nice about it, but it wasn't worth it to me. It wasn't worth it to me. And it would have been a fun job. I would have really enjoyed this job. But this was a company that was making money by having thoughts that it owned, thoughts and content that it owned. And this is not even code. This was just curriculum. It's thoughts and writing and thinking. And that meant that, in that particular case, I didn't get to the point where I would have had to look through the agreement and say, well, I mean, how do you know that I've delivered it to you? Okay, so is it only the stuff I've given you that you own, or is it every idea I had along the way to reach that point? And so then if I write another blog post that's similar to in spirit and then thought to this other thing, do you now own the blog post I had? Or are you going to come after me for the rest of my life for every idea I have related to anything that I put in the curriculum that I gave to you? And you see how quickly that spirals out of an acceptable level of risk, because I mean, this company could have followed everything I did from that point on and come after me for anything that they thought, originally for them or whatever. Right. And then that gets into copyright law and what do they really own and everything. So that's the one story. And then there's another story where I actually did work for a university, and they hired me and they paid me $3,000 to make the the new version um, of their entry level web course. And I did that. I hated it. I had to use their learning management software and everything. But it was really clear what they owned. And I was a 1099 contractor. I had been contracted to provide this work. They told me exactly where it had to be. There was no agreement outside of make us a course. And ownership of the course meant ownership of anything that was loaded into their shitty system that, that lived there forever, which, by the way, really just renewed my convictions to free knowledge from those kind of systems because but if I were to cut and paste the exact lines from that or to republish a video, I did get permission to publish YouTube videos that I could access from the site. So they did, there's still some question about whether they own that YouTube video or they just own the content that linked to the YouTube video. And I believe it's the second. But that was a case where they did not own my thoughts very clearly, but they owned my writing. They owned all of the writing and everything that I put into their system. And so those are all the different variations on this. At IBM, the case could be made that they owned my dreams because I wish I had the clause now, but it basically said any thought you have anywhere is ours. And I mean, you could tell it had come from a long time of having to deal with people, spinning off their own companies, based on stuff that, collectively they've arrived at while being exposed to a bunch of other things while they're at the company. So, and I don't even think the companies are totally wrong, by doing this. I mean, IP, particularly for a young company, is the most valuable thing you have. And I don't want to suggest that particularly young companies should go around throwing their IP around. In fact, it's been suggested that it was a strategy from Silicon Valley companies, including Microsoft, to give away all their patents and everything and their thoughts and their ideas for free because it put undue pressure on small companies to do the same thing when their only thing they had to market to get legs under them as a company was their unique ideas and their intellectual property when they got started. So if you give away your IP from the start, it's much harder to start a business model out of that if you want to do it. You can try to do it. I mean, GitLab has certainly tried to do that, but I would make the case that GitLab is failing right now to do that. So because they give too much away for free and they depend too much on open source contributions. And I mean, it's not one or the other. It's both. And so that's all I have to say about that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So just be careful. It depends on what you've written down. Make sure you look at that information.